Second part of this year's General Assembly will start tomorrow. Education, juvenile justice, income tax reductions, those are among the items that could highlight the legislative agenda.
WKYT's Phil Pendleton talked to House and Senate leaders about their priorities.
House leaders say don't expect any major policy measures or changes during the next several weeks in Frankfort.
And I think that's generally the purpose of the short session is to reflect on the major policies that you passed, make tweaks where they're necessary, make little changes where they're necessary.
But lawmakers are expected to hear testimony Tuesday morning about reports of a teacher shortage. State education leaders and the governor say there are 11,000 vacancies. Some Republicans say that's grossly inflated.
Somewhere between 1,700 and 2,400 may be the actual number. Not to be discounted, though. We know, and we have known for the last 20 years that there was a pending shortage of teachers nationwide.
But I will tell you the biggest reason why we have a teacher shortfall now is the working conditions. You know, teachers are concerned that they're being overworked. They're certainly highly regulated, too regulated.
It will be interesting to see what happens this session, if any, with sports betting and medical marijuana. Both issues passed the House last year but did not receive favorable votes, really even any hearings in the state Senate. The House passed both with solid margins last year with bipartisan support.
Apparently we've not necessarily done the greatest job in explaining them to the Senate. Hopefully we've done a better job of explaining them this year. I think there's still significant interest.
I'm more optimistic at this point about medical marijuana than sports gaming, but I'm not going to be surprised if sports gaming at the end of the session starts picking up some steam.
The Senate also still has to pass a further reduction to the income tax, and both chambers could also tackle juvenile justice reforms. In Frankfort, Phil Pendleton, WKYT.
Both House and Senate gavel in at 2 tomorrow. The session will run through March 30th or until March 30th.